Hello and welcome to Make It Heard, and introducing the writer today features Irene Stuart.
Hi, this is Irene Stuart. A big thank you to Sharon and Make It Heard for asking me to take part in Meet the Writer, and also enormous thanks to the actors for agreeing to read my pieces. As a writer, you have things in your head which you then transfer to the page. You edit and edit until you are satisfied, but it's not until you actually hear it read by an actor that your words and thoughts come alive. The next stage of seeing your writing performed on stage is mind-blowing. So a bit about me. I'm not your usual kind of writer, in that I haven't been writing since I was a dot, nor do I carry around a notebook in which I write daily observations. Don't get me wrong, I've always loved literature, and as a child the library was my favourite place to be. I loved writing compositions, and I always had a vivid imagination, having an imaginary friend called Borley for a while. Apparently, when I was about 4 years of age, I suddenly announced that Borley was dead. How or why, I'll never know. I don't even know how such a young child knew of death. Anyway, I digress. I think it was in 2011 that I saw a leaflet for a poetry competition, and I thought, I can do that. I wrote a short poem which received a commendation. This coincided with me joining Dingle Community Theatre, run by Tom McLennan. I immediately realised that I can't act for toffee, but I was drawn to the writing side. I also joined North End Writers, run by Pauline Rowe. Both Tom and Pauline have been extremely supportive of my writing, and they are both an inspiration. In less than a year of beginning writing, I had a play about an elderly lady living in a care home called My Name is Annette on stage, and my play, Please Please Dad, gained second place, beaten by a mere half a point in the first Ticket to Write competition, the brainchild of Jamie Gaskin, who we all know as the co-founder of Make It Right. I am now the proud recipient of a number of awards for drama, that being my favourite genre. Norwegian Wood is a play about stranger danger. Me and My Sister examines domestic abuse from a child's perspective, and Why looks at male suicide. I Am Not a Victim examines sexual assault from the viewpoint of the victim and her partner. All heavy stuff, but also something I enjoyed writing. And at each of the performances, members of the audience came to congratulate me on writing about such hard-hitting subjects. I do, however, now and then stray to writing comedy, both short pieces and a longer piece called Agnes and Me, which I showcased at the Hope Street Theatre in 2019. A big shout out to Darren Parsington, who not only directed Agnes and Me, but also acted in it. The cast were great and we had such a laugh. I've been a member of Lantern Writers since 2016, and we've put on a number of plays over the years. Our next performance being at the Royal Court Studio on the 4th, 5th, 6th of November. My play called Sweet 16 is being performed on the 6th and looks at sexual abuse. Yes, another hard-hitting play. Joining Make It Right has also encouraged me to continue writing even during COVID. Sharon's innovative ideas of competitions and challenges have kept many of us busy and have resulted in performances on Make It Heard and YouTube, also on Big Condo Radio. So thanks very much to both Sharon and to Chase. The return of live theatre can't come quick enough. I have a psychological thriller called The Visitor being performed at the Valley Theatre on the 27th of August. A Beatles theme play called Our Baby's Gone, which is loosely based on the song She's Leaving Home in October as part of the newly resurrected Ticket to Write competition. My advice to any writer is to write about what you see and what you feel. Don't be afraid to tackle difficult subjects and situations. Join a writing group and enter competitions. If you receive a rejection, that's fine. Remember, all art is subjective. Keep at it and good luck. I hope you enjoy tonight's pieces. Thanks, and thanks once again to Sharon and Make It Heard.
This is It Happened One Night, honestly, performed by Francesca Izo, written by Irene Stuart for Make It Heard.
What I'm going to tell you is rather strange, and some people who've heard my story have blatantly disregarded it as total bullshit. But I swear down that what I'm about to tell you is the truth. I swear on my mother's life. And if I had children, I'd swear on their lives too. I'm Emma, by the way. It was the 16th December 2019. I was having a night out in town with my two besties, Carla and Hayley. We've been mates since school, and we go out every Saturday night. Unless one of us has a better offer. Wink, wink. I'm the crazy one. Hayley's hot-headed and won't take any shit from no one. And Carla is the sensible one. You know, the one who makes sure that we all get home okay. The evening started off as per usual. Prosecco at Carla's while we made ourselves beautiful, followed by a few drinks in a couple of bars and then onto the Jacaranda on Slater Street. We met up with some other friends and we were having a great night. I was on good form, you know, getting pissed and playing the fool. It was my turn to buy a round. As I made my way to the bar, I suddenly felt a bit faint, so I decided to go and get some fresh air. Prosecco and shots. A lethal combination when you haven't had your tea. Carla told me later that she went looking for me when I didn't return with the drinks. She couldn't find me, so went outside. Connor, the doorman, said he hadn't seen me leave. Me and Connor have sort of a thing going, and we always have a flirt. And sometimes even a cheeky snog. He's quite cute, is Connor. Muscles over brain, if you get what I mean. I could just imagine Carla faffing about, worrying about me, while Hayley would be calling me fit to burn. You see, I have been known to wander off on many an occasion, either blind drunk or having met a hunky chunky. To be fair, sometimes the blind drunkenness has led me to wear my beer goggles, and my hunky chunky has turned out to be more of a skinny disappointment. The girls have come to my rescue more than once. Carla apparently tried to contact me a number of times, and they finally decided to call it a night at 2 a.m. Carla was just about to try ringing me again when Hayley spotted me sitting on a wall looking worse for the wear. Hayley wasted no time in giving me down the banks. Where had I been? Why hadn't I answered my mobile? Etc, etc. I felt confused and woozy, but she kept on bombarding me with questions. Carla was more sympathetic. She could see that I wasn't with it, and told me how worried they'd been, and showed me her mobile displaying the number of calls she'd made. We looked at my phone. There'd been no calls that evening. Hayley insisted that I must have knowingly turned off my phone, but Carla said I wouldn't do that. I agreed. Well, come on then, tell us where you've been all night. Hayley had a right cob on with me. I felt weird, kind of strange as I tried to retell what had just happened to me. I told them I felt faint when I got to the bar, so I went outside where a lad called Jimmy asked me if I was okay. Well, Connor said he didn't see you leave, said Carla. Before I could reply, Hayley went off on one. I knew there'd be a lad involved. I've got work in the morning. I'm going. Are you coming, Carla? Good old Carla said no. She wanted to make sure I got home as I didn't look well. So Hayley marched off in a right huff. This is what I then told Carla. Jimmy had been really nice, just looked a bit odd. Odd, not dodgy. Odd in that he was dressed in a black polo neck and a long overcoat. His hair was cut funny too, not like any of the lads we knew. He said he was a mod. He said that I looked the gear. I took that as a compliment because he was smiling. Lads we know would say fit or sick. We chatted a little bit longer, and as I felt loads better, we made our way back into the club. This is where it all becomes a bit weird. We walked back into the jacaranda. I pointed to the jacaranda door. That door there, but the club inside was totally different. Carla suggested that we go to A&E at the Royal. Perhaps I'd banged my head. I told her I was fine. The atmosphere in the club was electric. The girls were dressed in vintage clothes, you know, like the ones you can get from Bold Street. The lads all looked like Jimmy. Soul, the car my nan likes, was playing, and then 2 groups came on. Yes, Jimmy called them groups, not bands. He bought me some chicken and chips, which were in a little basket. I was starving. I hadn't had any tea, remember? Carla was looking at me funny, but she didn't say anything. I told her there'd been a group on called The Chance. They were mint. And then a group came on with a dead long name. Something about a bucket. I began to get the feeling that Carla didn't believe me, so I was a bit wary of telling her the next bit. Wait for it. Billy Butler from Radio Merseyside was the DJ playing the tunes in between the live music. Carla burst into uncontrollable, verging on hysterical laughter. Billy Butler must be at least 90 years old. I told her that the Billy Butler I saw was young, just like us. It was defo him. Jimmy said hello to him and introduced me to him. He said, "All right there, girl, enjoying yourself?" It was Billy Butler. Cross my heart and hope to die. Carla had hold of her mobile. She was ringing Delta. We were going straight to the Royal and no argument. I told her to hold on a sec. Unlike my 2 mates to go out virtually naked, I was wearing a coat. I produced a small piece of paper and passed it to Carla. It was a cloakroom ticket. Number 205, Mardi Gras, 16th December 1968. That stunned Carla into silence. Me too, if I'm honest. Carla began frantically keying something into her mobile. She read out loud, "The Mardi Gras Club, or Mardi, as it was affectionately named, was on Mount Pleasant. It was known for its soul nights and livable groups such as The Chance, and Colonel Bagshot's incredible bucket band often played there. It opened in 1957 and was demolished in 1975. We looked at each other. I knew what Carla was thinking. No, I hadn't made it up. I never even heard of the Mardi Gras. It would have been well gone before we were born. Carla looked at the ticket again. It was obviously new. There was no way it had been laying somewhere for almost 50 years. Carla was looking a bit pale. She asked what happened to Jimmy. I told her that he said he'd wait while I went to get my coat from the cloakroom, but he wasn't there. He must have done one. I left the club, and the next thing I knew, I was outside the jacaranda with Hayley having a go at me. Carla rang for a Delta and asked me whether I fancied some cheesy chips while we waited. I told her I wasn't hungry. I'd had the chicken in the basket with Jimmy. "You really did, didn't you?" said Carla. "Of course. I wouldn't lie to you," I replied.
That was It Happened One Night, Honestly, by Irene Stuart and read for us by Francesca Izo. This is Play Away. It's by Irene Stuart and it's performed by Robbie James Williamson for Make It Heard.
It had been an absolute shit of a day. As I drove home, all I could think of was having me tea, lying on the couch with a couple of cold beers and watching the footy. We need those elusive goals to get through to the next round. Liz was in the kitchen. Something smells nice. "Steak and chips," she replied. "In the middle of the week? Have we won the pools?" thought we'd push the boat out. I kissed her on the cheek as alarm bells rang. Her birthday, my birthday, Valentine's Day, our anniversary. What have I missed? As I passed the dining room, I noticed the table was set. We eat on our knees except on high days and holidays. Something is going on. I went upstairs to get my slippers, my brain addled. Oh, Jill always lets me know when something special's coming up. Maybe Liz just feels like steak for tea. I hope so, otherwise she'll have my guts for garters. She was already in the dining room, so I sat down opposite her. Prawn cocktail! What the hell is going on? We made small talk. Me regaling my shitty day, she taking little interest. Even my telling about the learner putting her hand on my knee instead of the gear stick didn't bring a reaction. Never mind a smile. She took out the dirty dishes and brought in the steak. This looks lovely. Liz didn't reply. We haven't had steak for ages. Medium rare, just as I like it. No reply. What's going on? What do you mean? Steak on a Wednesday. Eating in the dining room. Something's going on. We need to talk. Oh, no. Not the talk. This could be disastrous. To lighten the mood, I replied, What have you done this time? Crashed your car? Overspent on the credit card? The look said it all. Are you happy with our sex life? I was floored. I wasn't expecting that. Deflect the situation quickly. A simple yes or no could be catastrophic. Aren't you? No, I'm not, she replied, far too quickly and in my view rather harshly. Once a week is not enough. What happened to my Italian stallion? By the way, I haven't got an ounce of Italian in me, but it was our little joke. We couldn't get enough of each other in those first heady days of love and lust. Your Italian stallion was in his 20s and wasn't an overworked driving instructor. A lazy get, you mean? You sit on your fat backside all day being driven around, and then most nights you fall asleep in front of the telly before going to bed and snoring so loudly that the neighbours bang on the walls. Where'd this come from? Being a driving instructor is extremely dangerous and is mentally draining. You don't know the half of it. Dangerous. You think you were going to war. Well, it feels like it sometimes, being stuck in that car with stinky, argumentative learners. And don't forget all the women I have to fend off. Not to mention the men who take a fancy to me. My heart bleeds for you. This conversation wasn't going well at all, so I tried a different tact. I'm happy with our sex life. I thought you were too. What's happened to the excitement? The foreplay? All I get now is wham, bam. I don't even get a thank you, ma'am. You just turn over and start snoring like a pig. I've had enough. June and George do it at least 3 times a week. You've discussed our sex life with June? Mrs. Nosy Bucket. Of course. Don't you talk about sex with your mates? No, I don't. We talk about football and work. Well, that says it all, doesn't it? I looked at her. What the hell does she expect? We've been married for almost 25 years. I may no longer be her Italian stallion, but she is no longer my Sophia Loren. She's put on a good few pounds, and in all the wrong places. It was on the tip of my tongue to say so, but I thought better of it. Silence. We sat across the table from each other, two gunslingers sizing each other up. So, what do you propose we do? We are going to bring lust and adventure into the bedroom. Stirrups, whips and nipple clamps came to mind. I hope the nipple clamps are for her. I don't like pain. I went out with this girl once who insisted on pouring hot candle wax on my chest. I cried like a baby. Never saw her again. Go and have a shower, get into bed, and let the show begin. Oh, but it's the semis. Now! Oh. I did as I was told. The semis. Maybe I'll get to see the second half. The doorbell rang. Please, God, let it be someone for her so that I can watch the footy. I lay in bed, trepidation stirring in my loins. The bedroom door opened. Liz came in, followed by what can only be described as the most gorgeous creature I've ever seen in my entire life. This is Helga. Helga is wearing one of those little Swiss outfits. She is stunning, drop dead gorgeous. Something quickly stood her attention. Oh my God, all my Christmases have come at once. I reached out for the sumptuous Helga. Then, ow! An elbow in the ribs. Will you stop bloody snoring? I looked around. It was dark. Helga, where are you? Oh, it had all been a bloody dream. Helga, Helga, come back. Have you ever tried to get back into a dream? It's bloody impossible. I lay on my back, thoughts of Helga swimming around my head, my body tense with excitement and disappointment. I rolled over and snuggled into Liz's ample body. Get off, you dirty ticket. It's not Saturday. And who the hell is Helga?
That was Play Away by Irene Stuart and performed by Robbie James Williamson for Make It Heard. This is A Box of Frogs and it's by Irene Stuart and it's performed by Ruby Joanne Smith.
It was Mother's Day last week. Oh, I hate it. All the hype, the nonsense. Same as Father's Day. What about all the shitty mothers and fathers in the world, eh? No mention of them in the cards full of teddies and flowers. To my wonderful mum. To the best dad ever. Oh, it's a joke. I always get sort of sad leading up to Mother's Day, but I have to stay strong, be realistic. The woman who gave birth to me doesn't deserve my love. Bitter? I'm not bitter. I'm not, honestly. Don't get me wrong, I was up to a few years ago, but now I'm just a ragtag of mixed emotions. I genuinely feel the bitterness has disappeared.
Well, or maybe it's buried so far down that it gives the impression it's gone away. Maybe it will resurface just when I least expect it. You see, I loved my mum, really loved her. I've still got some of the cards I made for her when I was little. I suppose I should throw them away. Oh, I got as far as putting them in the kitchen bin once. I pushed them deep down and went out. I couldn't stop thinking of them in that bin, and I took them out as soon as I got home. One had egg all over it and the other was covered in beans. My Auntie Joan got rid of everything else, my toys, clothes, anything that would remind me of her. Oh, I wish she hadn't, but she thought she was doing what was best for me. She spent a lot of money replacing everything, but I wanted my old things. Oh, I used to cry myself to sleep every night. I was only 7. Oh, Auntie Joan was the best. She died of cancer last year. She took me in, but no matter what she did for me, I just couldn't see her as my mum. I played up something ruthless when I was about 12. I'll never know how she put up with me. She had her own kids to look after and Uncle Alex. I thanked her for what she did for me and told her I loved her before she passed away. I hope she heard me. I think she did because she smiled and nodded even though she was in a lot of pain. Oh, Uncle Alex was ace. He still is. Oh, he became like a dad to me. I never knew my real father, so it was easy to accept him as the male figure in my life. Oh, he was such good fun, a right laugh. His hair's grey now, but he was proper ginger in those days. His beard's still got a tinge of red in it now, even though he's in his 70s. I overheard one of the many social workers say that she thought I'd be too much for them to handle and she'd found a place for me in a children's home. I don't know why she said that. I was painfully shy and wouldn't say boo to a goose. Well, Uncle Alex almost threw her out of the house. I remember she had a gammy leg and oh God, what do you call it? What REM? You know, that thing when the eyes keep blinking all the time. Strange what you remember from your childhood and what we choose to forget. It's the things you can't forget that cause the problems. I've got a new therapist. Saw her for the first time last week. I've been with Charles for almost a year and felt comfortable with him, but his pregnant fiancée has decided she wants to live closer to her family, so they're off to Dorset. I got quite upset at our last appointment. He said he'll miss me. Is that professional, do you think? He didn't say it in a sexual way or anything like that, but as if he was saying it to an old friend. He said that he has every faith in Della and he swore that she'll look after me. He gave me a hug. I'm a bit weird with hugs, but that hug felt comfortable, sort of comforting. Oh, I was dreading my first meeting with Della. Charles had checked if I was okay seeing a female as there was a long waiting list to see a male. I bit the bullet and said yes. Even though I get on so much better with men than women. It's all to do with my mum, you see. Della is defo odd, but I'll hold fire on the final analysis until I've had a few more meetings with her. Last week's mainly entailed talking through my experiences as a kid and how they've affected my life. She showed very little emotion, but I noticed her left leg was shaking like a billy-o. A definite sign that she was shocked. I mean, I know she's a therapist, but I wonder how many times she's had to listen to a client describe sexual abuse by her mother. Well, I'm just on my way to see her again. I'll fill you in when I get back. Well, you'll never guess what just happened. That Della is something else. I was describing how losing Auntie Joan had brought back all the dark thoughts. I told her that some days I feel as mad as a box of frogs. She did no more than leap from her chair, crouch on the floor, and jump around making frog noises. Ribbit, ribbit, ribbit. Oh, this went on for a good few seconds. Honest to God, I didn't have a clue how to react. I mean, would you? She's supposed to be the sane one. Well, she eventually stopped and sat back down, gasping for breath. Oh, I just sat there with my mouth open. Charles was, how shall I say it? A bit strange, but Della, well, she's a different kettle of fish altogether. Once she could breathe more easily, she proceeded to tell me that her frog impersonation was in order to convince me that my belief that I'm as mad as a box of frogs is way off the mark. She said that, given what I've been through, I'm remarkably well adjusted. As far as I'm concerned, the jury's still out on that contention. It took me years of therapy to accept that what my mother did to me and made me do to her is abuse. When you've been told that all mummies do it to their little girls to show how much they love them, you believe it. Perhaps she believed it. I found out years later that during her trial, her brief had ascertained that her mother, my grandmother, who died when I was 3, had abused her as a child, and therefore she saw the abuse as natural and normal. There was apparently no evidence of this, and my Auntie Joan refuted it on the witness stand, saying that their mother had in no way abused either of them. My mother was kind of strange. I went totally off the wall. She had a terrible temper, but could also be loving on the turn of a penny. She was a drinker and liked the odd spliff, although I didn't know it at the time. She was also into hard drugs. She always worked, either in a pub or in a bookies. I remember she was even a dinner lady in my school for a couple of weeks. Not long after she was dismissed, the first social worker arrived on our doorstep. There were many after that, as my mother's weird behaviour began to spiral out of control and our life became more and more chaotic. I've asked myself many times this question. If my mum's problems were as a result of her having been abused, why would she impose it on me? I can't get my head around that one. I wish I could ask her, but I've no idea if she's dead or alive. Maybe I'll search for her when Uncle Alex passes away. Oh God, I hope that won't be for a long time. Through the years, my feelings and thoughts have moved backwards and forwards like a swing boat in the local park. That's one of my childhood memories, being taken to the swing boats after my mum had, God, no wonder I'm fucked up. Charles said I've made good progress over the past year. He's probably right, as I do seem able to think more rationally than in the past, and maybe Della can take me even further down that road to recovery. And I promise you won't tell anyone. You're the first to know. I've met someone, and I think he could be the one. Oh, I've never felt like this before. I've always stayed clear of a proper relationship. You see, I'm scared of having kids. But what if I turn out like her? What if it does run in the family? Oh, anyway, last night I told Harry everything. Oh, he was such a love. He cried and I comforted him and I was hugging him. It felt wonderful. We even talked about having kids. No, not just yet, but possibly sometime in the future. Maybe that's why the meeting with Della went so well today. I probably came across as almost normal, and that's how Harry makes me feel. And I've made a decision. Those Mother's Day cards are going in the bin and staying there. Maybe not tonight, but definitely someday soon.
That was A Box of Frogs by Irene Stuart, and it was performed by Ruby Joanne Smith. This is It's Not Me by Irene Stuart and performed by Wayne Stewart Cole.
Actions have consequences. Why can't people take that on board? Why do that without thought for anybody else? They just plough on, not asking questions and therefore not getting any answers. It's a witch hunt, a 21st century witch hunt. If the baying crowd had gotten hold of me, I dread to think what they'd have done. I'm convinced I wouldn't be here to tell the tale. I would have been swinging from the nearest tree, been kicked and beaten to death, or been thrown in the park lake. The whole scenario has left me a gibbering wreck. I can't eat. I'm under investigation at work, and I'm scared to leave the house. Sleep. I don't know what sleep is. I close my eyes and all I see and hear is the hammering on the windows, the front and back doors being kicked in, and the noise of the crowd baying for blood. If the police hadn't arrived. It all started 3 weeks ago. 2 plainclothes policemen were on the doorstep. They told me we needed to have a chat at the station. I'd witnessed a road traffic accident a few days before, and I assumed that I was needed to give a statement. I was taken to a room and left on my own for some 20 minutes or so. I wasn't worried. I'd done nothing wrong. So I spent the time speculating as to who had previously sat in that room and what misdemeanours they'd committed. Arson, assault, maybe even murder. I'm a sucker for crime novels. I tried to write one once. Got to chapter 3 and realised I'd dried up. I'd already divulged who was the murderer halfway through the first chapter. While ruminating on my ill-fated sojourn into crime writing, a man around my age came in, introduced himself as the duty solicitor. If we both agreed he'd represent me if need be. What's going on? I'm here to give a statement about a woman being run over. It was her fault. She just stepped off the pavement. The driver didn't stand a chance. Joseph Barber ignored my question as he continued taking down my details. He was balding right in the middle of his head. I wondered if he was aware of the growing sparse patch. He wouldn't be able to see it in the mirror. I contemplated telling him, but thought better of it. Joseph Barber didn't look as if he possessed much of a sense of humour. I'd done nothing wrong, so I remained calm, anticipating I'd soon be on my way home. One of the aforementioned detectives entered looking grim and carrying a file. He hadn't been a laugh a minute on the journey to the station, but now he looked as if he'd swallowed a wasp. Barber stood and moving around the table sat next to me. Detective Travis sat opposite. Travis attacked like a bull in a china shop. He asked a number of personal questions, including what was my relationship with Miss Sarah Atkins. Relationship? She's my neighbour. She brought me round a shepherd's pie the day I moved in. I'm a ping food man. She cooks me the odd meal and gives me a roast on a Sunday. The home-cooked meals are most welcome. In return, I do the odd DIY job, a bit of this and that. What about her son, Justin? He's a good kid. I've taken him to the match a couple of times. We watched the footy on Sky and we're both gamers. Sarah says he looks up to me. He doesn't see his real dad. What about Justin's friends? They sometimes come in with him. I give them pop and sweets. We have a laugh. You know, all men together. But they're not men. They're 10 years of age. It's just a figure of speech. Joseph Barber advised me not to answer anything which made me feel uncomfortable. But I had nothing to hide. I'd done nothing wrong. So I answered each question without rancour. There was no comment from me. Was it my intention to groom the boys? I mean, there it was, out in the open. I was beginning to feel things weren't going my way. A newspaper cutting was placed before me. Mother voices concerned that a registered paedophile has been allocated a property in her local area. The name of the cause of concern. Jeffrey O'Brien. That's not me. I've never been to prison in my life. We are aware of that, replied Travis, but we have reason to believe that the locals have put 2 and 2 together and made 5. You need to be careful. I work with kids, for God's sake. I'm not a paedophile. The neighbours had seen me go off in the police car. The word pedo had been written in paint on my front door and windows. I mean, Jesus, they can't even spell. Following day saw the lynch mob arrive. 3 weeks on, Sarah still keeps Justin away, and I'm back to eating ping food. It's mistaken identity. If only people would think before blindly acting without questioning. Yes, the police have warned the troublemakers to keep away. But I'm still scared. I think I'll have to move house again.
That was It Wasn't Me, and it was by Irene Stuart, and it was performed by Wayne Stuart Cole for Make It Heard. This is A Letter to Barbara, and it's by Irene Stuart, and it's performed by Mary Savage for Make It Heard.
Dear Barbara, they say what goes around comes around. Well, you'll be pleased to know that it's come around with a vengeance. Have you been sticking pins in one of those voodoo dolls? Mind you, if you had, I'd probably be dead by now. I know you hate me. You made that very clear when you posted the number of notices on the school gates. Miss Graham is a home wrecker. She has stolen my husband and torn my family apart. Do not trust her with your children. I was the talk of the staff room, and I had to appear before the board. Luckily, many of the parents stood up for me. I'm a good teacher, you see. The dog mug through the letterbox was another indication of your hatred for me, and the scratches on my car. He told me you are an out-and-out bitch. A woman scorned who couldn't take that he had fallen in love with someone else. Someone younger and more attractive, more academic. I believed him. What a fool I was. Now it's my turn to hate. But strangely enough, I don't hate her. I feel sorry for her. I'm not a horrible person, despite what you must think. I was young, impressionable, and I wanted so much to have a fairy tale ending. He was, well, you know what he's like. You fell for him too. Friends tried to warn me, but I dismissed their misgivings. I know it sounds ridiculous, but I really did believe him when he said he was with you for the sake of the children, that he loved only me. You must have broken in two when we moved in together. To be honest, I didn't think of you. I was so happy. Looking back, I was selfish, but he convinced me that it was you who was the problem. Love? He doesn't know the meaning of the word. I realised that when he suggested we have an open relationship. Silly me. I even contemplated it, just to keep him. I would have done anything to keep him. I was putty in his hands and he knew exactly how to work me. Well, it all came out yesterday. He's been having an affair with our neighbour Jackie. Yeah, the bastard who professed his undying love to me has been at it again. He wasn't even apologetic. No pretense. No, it won't happen again. In fact, he was smirking, despite the black eye administered by Tony, Jackie's husband. I packed his bags there and then and made a great show of throwing them into the road. He and Jackie went off together, she hanging on to him for dear life. Poor sod. I shouted after them. He'll dump you next. I feel such a fool. And there's a tiny part of me that's missing him. But it's still early days. I know I'll get over him. And so, Barbara, I want you to know that I'm sorry for the hurt that I caused you and the children. I hope you'll forgive me, and I hope you've now moved on. I know I will. He is not worth our tears. Kate.
That was Leicester Barbara, and it was by Irene Stuart, and it was performed by Mary Savage for Make It Hers. This is That Thing That Shapes Us, and it's by Irene Stuart, and it's performed by John Jones for Make It Heard.
It's strange how your life can turn on a sixpence based on one momentous event. In my case, that event occurred over 50 years ago, but it still haunts me to this day. It shaped me into the man I became. My dad was hard. I don't mean in terms of being a thug, although on occasions he had been known to bare knuckle fight when he was younger. No, I mean he was difficult and belligerent, and he was also a strict disciplinarian with us kids. He didn't beat us or anything like that, although our Thomas quite often got the back of Dad's hand for some misdemeanour or other. But the rest of us were too scared to risk his wrath. For an uneducated man, he had a raft of words which could reduce every one of us to tears. Strong words, which hit home more than any slap could have done. He never showed us any kind of affection. Even in drink, which it was most nights, he never gave us a cuddle or told us he loved us. And Dad, despite his love of the demon drink, was never out of work, and he loved to tell us how lucky we were to have a roof over our heads and food in our bellies. He seemed to think that as a father that was all that was required of him. I remember when our Nathan fell off the roof. A tile had dislodged, and for months the lad's bedroom was awash every time it rained. Well, Dad kept saying he'd sort it, but he never did, so our Nathan decided that as the eldest lad it was up to him. He was 13. Mum had gone to get the messages. Nathan waited until she was out of sight, as she would never have allowed him up there. I was designated to hold the ladder sneaked from the Lomax's backyard 3 doors down. Our Nathan shinned up the ladder like a monkey on a stick. He shouted down that he'd found the culprit tile and he'd be down in a jiffy. How right he was. Next thing, our Nathan went flying past me. He made not a sound, but the thud as he hit the floor resounded down the street. There was blood everywhere. His body was all crumpled up. I didn't know what to do. I was 8. Luckily, Dr. Bruce was visiting old Mr. Dutch in number 4. We called him old Mr. Dutch because he was from Holland and we couldn't pronounce his name. And Dr. Bruce had just come out of the house as our Nathan splattered on the pavement. He came running over, but it was too late. And I started howling just as our Mam came round the corner. Poor Mam. She never got over it. But Dad, he just carried on as usual. Got drunk at the funeral. Never asked us kids how we felt at losing our Nathan, and nor did he show our Mam any additional affection or sympathy. Looking back, it's as if Nathan was disposable. There were 7 of us left, and our Mam went on to have 2 more. Nathan had just been a number, another mouth to feed. Our Mam was the complete opposite. She was kind and caring, the best Mam ever. And in her day she'd been really beautiful. By the time she passed away she was worn out, her face lined with the tears she'd shed, her body broken by all the childbearing and looking after him and all us kids. It was about a year after our Nathan had passed that it happened. I'd been playing ollies at playtime and I'd just won Jeremy Shaw's shooter. He wasn't happy as it was his prized possession. "I won it back at dinner time," he growled. "Well, no way," I replied, and he grabbed me round the neck and tried to pull me to the floor. I was a skinny rump back then and he was much bigger than me. Luckily, the bell went, signifying the end of playtime, and he let go of me, but not before shouting out, "I don't want the stinking ollie anyway, 'cause your mother's a prosy." "Oh, no, she's not," I said defensively. She's a Catholic." The other kids had gone into the building except for me and Jeremy and my best mate Connor Green. Connor put his arm round me, as lads do, and he laughed as he said, "You're so funny. For the cleverest lad in the class, you're so thick sometimes." Well, all through that next lesson, which I clearly remember was geography, I kept thinking of what Jeremy had said about my mum. Judging by Connor's reaction, I'd clearly got the Catholic Protestant connotation totally wrong. Well, I resolved to go home at dinner time, and instead of staying for school dinners, yes, I'd go home and I'd ask my mum if she's a prosy. Well, I ran all the way home, and when I got there I could hear noises coming from the kitchen, the kind of noise my dad made during the night. He must have come home for his dinner too. I was just turning away to go back to school when I heard a stranger's voice. "Money's there on the table, Connie. Same time next week." I heard Mum reply, "Yeah, same time next week." I hid by the lavvy, which in those days was outside in the yard, and this man I'd never seen before came out of our kitchen. Something told me that things weren't right. I decided not to see Mum, and I hightailed it back to school just in time for my dinner. Cold spuds, cold peas and a piece of cold liver and congealed gravy. The pudding, however, was my favourite. The currant sponge, which we call fly cake, and custard with a thick skin on. I couldn't stop thinking about the stranger, and I waited outside school for our Joseph. He was 12. He came out carrying Shirley's books. She lived at the top of our road, and our Joseph was sweet on her. I walked behind him, kicking at the stones, waiting for her to disappear into her house, Our conversation went something like this. Joseph, Joseph! Oh, what now? What's a prosy? What do you want to know for? Is it a Protestant? Oh, don't be stupid, that's a proddy dog. So what's a prosy? It's a prostitute. A woman who goes with a man for money and nobody likes her. Now don't let our mam hear you asking such questions. We were home by now, and so that was it. End of conversation. A woman who goes with a man for money? Goes where? Was our mam going to go away? Next day I went to the library and I asked for a dictionary and I looked up the word prostitute. I didn't quite understand what I was reading, but at least our mam wasn't going to leave us. I never forgot the sound of that stranger in our kitchen, and it haunted me for some time. I no longer saw our mam in the same light. She was doing something that was bad. And when I was older and I knew the full meaning of the word, I realised that mam had been doing what she did because of dad's drinking. He never gave her enough money to keep us all, but I still found it difficult to forgive her. I went to sea at 16. I just couldn't live there any longer. I couldn't look mam in the eye. And when I left the sea, I returned home while I looked for digs. By this time our mam's health had gone right down and she was confined to bed. One night I was reading a paper to her and she suddenly said, "You know, don't you, Michael?" "Know what, mam?" "What I did, what it was all those years ago. I saw you running up the street that day." I interrupted. "Forget it, mam. You did what you had to do." Our mam took hold of my hand and kissed it. She died the next day. Dad was distraught, that bastard. I found Diggs and I never saw him again. I never even went to his funeral. I've never married. I had a few relationships when I was younger, but they never felt right except for one. Kathleen. I fell head over heels. She was, yes, what we now call a working girl. I was in the Navy and, like most sailors, I frequented brothels. I never had sex with the girls, I just talked to them and gave them money. They all had their reasons for doing what they did. Kathleen was special. I even asked her to marry me. She refused, saying that her occupation would come between us. She was probably right. I never had kids, although I became a geography teacher. I was a good one too. The kids loved me and I loved them. I don't know to this day whether Jeremy Shaw knew about our mam, or whether, like me, he thought a prosy was a Protestant, which, given that we went to a Catholic school, was nevertheless an insult. Whether he did or not is of no consequence now. What I do know is those words and what followed that day changed the course of my life forever. I often think of how different things might have been.
Performing That Thing That Shapes Us was John Jones, and it was written by Irene Stuart for Make It Heard. This is Autumn Leaves, and it's by Irene Stuart, and it's performed by Helen Jones for Make It Heard.
Leaves are individuals, you know. They're just like people. Have you ever watched them fall from a tree? It's fascinating. Some follow the others like lemmings as they leap into the unknown. Some preen and check their stature as if about to take a selfie. Some jump as if off the top of a diving board doing a Tom Daly, twisting and turning, hoping to gain a perfect 10. Others cling onto the branch for dear life, scared of what lies beneath. You see, just like us humans, teetering on the springboard of life. Oh, there's Mr. Green, the gardener. He waves, I wave back. How I laughed when he first came to work for us. Mr. Green, the gardener. It still tickles me now. How long is it? Let me see. Oh my goodness, it's 9 years. He's a lovely man, one of the best. He said that I should call him Simeon, for that's his Christian name, but I was taught to respect my elders, so he's Mr. Green to me. I remember asking him if he had a daughter called Teresa. He laughed, but I think he was just being polite. He must have heard that joke 100 times. I hate the autumn. Mr. Green knows it gives me the heebie-jeebies, so he doesn't beckon for me to come and help him sweep the leaves. I help him the rest of the year, though, but just not in the autumn. Watching the leaves and seeing Mr. Green's made me feel a bit sick. I think I need to sit down. I wish I could sweep away these thoughts as easily as Mr. Green sweeps away those leaves. It's the autumn, you see. This is what it does to me. It brings back memories. If only I could hibernate throughout autumn until the coldness of winter arrives. Dad left when I was born, so I have no idea what he was like. Mum never talked about him. It was just me and her against the world. She was lovely, was my mum. We lived in a flat, but she used to take me to the park every day after nursery and then every day after school. That's where I became fascinated by leaves. I loved to hold them and feel the veins as they threaded around the leaf, just like the veins in a hand. I loved the different colours of green and the different shades of brown when autumn came. I loved the feel of the scrunchy autumn leaves underfoot as it danced in the light sun. It was exhilarating, but I always felt a little apprehensive, as if I was dancing on a grave. Poor Mr. Green, he's fighting a losing battle trying to sweep up those leaves. They're falling so thick and fast. He's not really up to the job now. He'd already retired when he came to work for us. Everything changed between me and my mum when she met Barry. I was 10. I was used to having mum all to myself, and I admit I wasn't very welcoming. I did my best to get rid of him. He loved mum, you see, and with hindsight I can see that he loved me too. Hindsight is a wonderful thing. Barry did a lot for me and mum. He bought a lovely house with a garden and gave me a patch to plant whatever I wanted. It was a little way off from the oak tree. He even built me a tree house. I spent many a happy hour up there watching the leaves, hedges and grass changing colour, watching the birds feathering their nests and welcoming the odd interloper, the squirrels who came to visit. That tree house was my refuge from a changing world. Despite all that Barry did for us, I couldn't forgive him for taking mum away from me. I admit I resented their love for each other. One day they called me from my haven into the kitchen. Mum looked sheepish and Barry was grinning from ear to ear. "You tell her," he said. "No, you tell her," she said. "Tell me what?" I mumbled. I was 13. "You're going to have a baby brother or sister," said Barry proudly. I stood there aghast, ran for my refuge. A baby! I vowed there and then to hate it. I watched as Mum's belly extended. Joshua was born in the October as I was 14 in the November. The oak tree was beginning to shed its leaves, although some were hanging on as if their life depended on it. I loved my little brother from the first minute I set eyes on him. He was so small, gorgeous. He loved me too. Everybody said so. If he cried and I picked him up, he stopped crying immediately. I swear to God he smiled at me. I know it wasn't wind. It really wasn't. It was a Thursday. Joshua was 6 days old. Mum and Barry asked if I could watch over him just while they went shopping for an hour. It was starting to turn cold and he had a bit of a wheezy chest, so they didn't want me to take him outdoors. Mum fed Joshua, changed him, and he was sleeping peacefully when they left. I went into the kitchen to do my homework, but kept checking on him. He was fast asleep and looked ever so contented. I heard Mum and Dad come home. Barry came into the kitchen. He saw me hunched over my books and left. My mother let out a piercing scream, a sound I can't forget no matter how I try. I ran from the kitchen to the living room. Mum was hysterical. Barry grabbed me. "Where's the baby?" The police arrived and I was questioned time and time again. Mum said the front door had been ajar when they arrived home. It was at the other end of the hall from the kitchen and I hadn't noticed it was open when I checked on Joshua. There was nothing missing from the house, just my baby brother. The police surmised that somebody had entered the house and then taken the baby while I was doing my homework. The story was all over the news. You may have seen it. My mum and Barry did one of those television appeals. Mum was as pale as a ghost. She blamed herself for not closing the door properly. Barry was distraught. Day 4, Joshua's little body was found under the leaves under the oak tree. Doctors argued as to whether he had died from sudden infant death syndrome, from asphyxiation or from hypothermia. I suddenly became the chief suspect. Despite my denials and my protestations that I loved him, the papers seized on the story and I became a hate figure. I was portrayed akin to the child murderer Mary Bell. Nobody would listen to me. I had a breakdown. The prosecution team said I had mental health issues, that I was jealous of my mum's love for Barry, that I hated Joshua with a vengeance. My defence argued that that was not the case. I was guilty of manslaughter and was not of sound mind when I performed the heinous act. I was found guilty of the murder of my little brother. I swear I didn't do it. I loved him. Mr. Green! Mr. Green! Stop breaking the leaves, you'll hurt the baby. You'll hurt Joshua. Oh, you get out of my room. Get out of my room. Get away. Leave me alone. Leave me alone.
That was Autumn Leaves, read by Helen Jones and written by Irene Stuart for Make It Heard.
Only Human by Irene Stuart. According to family folklore, from the moment my brother arrived on the bathroom floor, it was abundantly clear that he would be a handful. From wailing non-stop to refusing to take the breast, Mother was apparently at her wit's end within the first week of his birth. By the age of 6 months, my mother, totally exhausted from Colin's constant demands, would take a much-needed daily nap. She and Colin tied to each other by a strong length of bandage. The said bandage tied tightly round the baby's waist and mother's wrist. After much struggling, screaming and crying, both would eventually fall asleep. One day, when Colin was around 10 months old, mother awoke to discover the bandage hanging from her wrist. In a panic, she frantically called to the child, who was yet unable to walk, and she found him in the lounge hitting the coffee table with his toy hammer. Colin brought mayhem to the lives of my parents. Having decided that he should be an only child, to their horror, mother became pregnant with me. On mother's death, I discovered an entry in her diary stating she contemplated a termination, but she'd been unable to commit such a heinous act. Further entries describe me as a model baby, child, teenager and adult, the antithesis to my brother. My brother's unruly and often manic behaviour continued through the years. My parents tried to get help, but back then Colin was just regarded as naughty. Support not forthcoming, as he was seen to be the product of a loving and caring family. Although 3 years younger, I recognised at an early age that much of his behaviour was totally unacceptable. This, however, did not stop me from looking up to him in the adoring way so often adopted by younger siblings. Mother always took his side when we were growing up. I was in my first year of high school when she confided she did this mainly because she was afraid of the possible consequences. This could be Colin breaking household items, threatening her with violence, to actually attacking her. I had mistakenly believed that he took preference over me, and for much of my childhood I was jealous of the attention she gave him. Her confession and my later discovery of the diary made me realise the pressure she must have been under. Despite mother doing her utmost to hide his many misdemeanours from father, there were too many for him to escape the wrath. Far from being a disciplinarian, father was rather a mild-mannered bank manager, but at times was at the end of his tether. He would resort to whipping Colin's legs, leaving welts so big you could fry eggs on them. During such punishment I cowered under the sheets, while mother sobbed loudly in the bathroom. Not a sound would we hear from Colin. After the beating, no matter what the weather, father would go into the garden where he remained for hours. Colin, without an ounce of remorse, would retire to his bedroom, where he silently waited for me to put a soothing salve on his wounds. He winced at each touch, but not a word did he utter. The look behind his eyes would say it all. There was little doubt he was plotting his revenge. That day, as I sat at his bedside, I saw glimpses of the young Colin, the troubled youngster thrashing around, railing against everything and everybody, railing against the world. The needle to his arm soon calmed him down, and peace was restored, except for the sound of his laboured breathing. Holding his hand seemed strange, alien. Colin had never been one for showing affection. He would sometimes ask mother if he could take me to the local shop to buy me sweets. I could see her toying with this request. She would usually agree on the understanding that he held my hand when crossing the road. He never did, but I instinctively knew that he was looking out for me. He adored me as I adored him. Now and then I felt a slight pressure to my hand as I told Colin that I loved him and not to be afraid. Spending those hours alone with him led me to remember incidents I'd long hidden in a bid to ensure self-preservation. I would be about 5 years of age. I was sitting on the swing and Colin was lying on the floor observing an army of ants as they traversed in line across the paving stones. Ants are very intelligent creatures, I announced, having recently learnt that in school. With that, Colin jumped up, wilfully and deliberately stamping on the row of ants. I was distraught and ran sobbing into the house. Mother's reaction was one I came to know well. Colin's only human and boys will be boys. Flies, slugs, caterpillars, even butterflies suffered a similar fate. But those incidences paled into insignificance when about 6 months later, Mother and I discovered Jeremy, the family cat, hanging in the garden shed. Silently, Mother cut him down and we buried him in the garden. Colin was nowhere to be seen. We told Father that Jeremy had gone missing, but Mother and I knew. As long-forgotten memories resurfaced, Colin's breathing became increasingly shallow, the pressure on my fingers no more, until finally I knew he had gone. I touched his forehead. The nurse approached, felt his pulse and nodded. She gently brushed my shoulder, a gesture I found surprisingly comforting. I was summoned to the office to sign some papers, and within 15 minutes of his passing, I found myself alone on the pavement. Needing a stiff drink, I found my way to the nearest bar, where I ordered a double whiskey. Sitting down, I ruminated on how my mother would have been appalled at my entering a bar. Arriving home fully clothed, I went straight to bed, where I fell asleep, to be woken by Greg some hours later. "Why didn't you call?" "Sorry," I replied sleepily. "Hungry?" I nodded. Greg and I sat on meals on our laps. I noticed the telephone receiver was off the hook. The music introducing the 6 o'clock news blared from the television. We braced ourselves. It was, as expected, the first item to be announced. The newsreader, face like stone, read grimly from his auto cue. Colin Blackwell, aged 54, had passed away today from lung cancer. Blackwell, known as the Cross and Chain Murderer. Greg zapped the remote and the screen just went blank as my mobile rang. It had begun again. It was not over despite it being over.
That was Only Human, and it was written by Irene Stuart and performed by Claire Kelly for Make It Heard. This is Come Closer, performed by Andy Edwards, and it's written by Irene Stuart for Make It Heard.
Sorry, I've never done this before. I'm not much of a public speaker. I went to pieces when I was my brother's best man. Yes, he asked me. Said I'm his best mate. So there I was doing all the best man jokes. Well, trying to. I totally dried up at one point, and that got the best, or should I say only laugh of the entire speech. I was mortified. Right. Here goes. Come a little closer to your radio or whatever device you're using. Close your eyes. Yes, please, close your eyes. No matter what you're doing, stop, come closer and close your eyes, just for a few moments. Humour me, please. You have already probably built up a picture of me based on my voice and what I have already told you about myself. Now, consciously, try to envisage me. What do you see? Am I handsome Not so handsome, perhaps. Am I young? Old? Do I have a job? Do I have children? I could go on, but I'm aware that you could be standing stark naked in your kitchen with your eyes closed, and it is rather cold, so perhaps it's time for you to open them now. What is this man on, I hear you ask yourselves? Life. I'm high on life. No, I'm not. Life has been pretty shitty for most of us at the moment, don't you agree? But as we see life returning to a new normal, life is beginning to look pretty damn good. Where is this heading? I'm not exactly sure, but I know I have to get a few things off my chest before I explode. I'd love to know what you heard when I asked you to listen closely to me. Did you hear a wife beater? Someone you wouldn't trust as far as you could throw? Someone who drowns kittens? Someone who would put his aging parent in a home without a second thought, or heaven forbid, someone who buys up all the toilet rolls? You know you can't always tell as to the delectations of others, but most of us get a sort of feeling when we first come into contact with an individual, be it in the flesh or otherwise. So, first impressions? Let me fill you in. I'm not a wife beater. In fact, my wife, Janet, considers me quite a catch. I've never drowned a kitten in my life, cross my heart. And as for toilet rolls, I wouldn't dream of buying more than we as a family need. I'm not sure about putting the parents in a home. The in-laws, perhaps. Only joking. In truth, I'm honest, kind, caring. Just your average Joe. Of course, I have my faults. I can be a bit abrasive, a tad argumentative, sometimes a little self-absorbed. Oh, and I can't stand people who turn up late and I'm told I have an extremely low tolerance level. I also get bored quite quickly, and I don't suffer fools gladly. That said, I mean those tiny little quirks are nothing to be ashamed of, are they? So, what has prompted me to sit here and pour my heart out to complete strangers? Notice I say strangers, as I sincerely hope there is more than one of you listening in. I'm way out of my comfort zone. It's a wonder you can't hear my heart beating like the clappers, and my knees knocking. My Janet is standing in the corner giving me the thumbs up. Why did I agree to do this? Because people out there need to be told. Before March 2020, which seems eons ago, Brexit was on everybody's lips. As we know, families were divided and friendships compromised. Social media was awash with Brexiteers versus Remainers slagging each other off no end. I kept out of it. I didn't want to get involved. I'm a Remainer. We lost. What can we do other than embrace the situation, pray to God, cross fingers and toes, and hope for the best? I blame Cameron. Never take such an emotive and important subject to the electorate. Come the pandemic, I had, as many others, an inordinate amount of spare time on my hands. Apart from becoming a couch potato and developing a strong liking for jelly babies, there wasn't much else to do, so I turned to social media to while away the long hours. Oh my God, what a hodgepodge of charlatans. I have never encountered such bias in my life. Such negativity from those who have little or no understanding of the world of politics, from others who have probably never exercised their franchise, yet were intent on spewing vitriol and antagonism at anyone who dares to defy their narrow thinking. In the most lurid of terms, they berated anyone who doesn't hold their views, yet when politely asked to set out their views in a concise fashion, they blustered and spouted the same old rhetoric time after time. So have you guessed why I asked you to consider my personality? Did you realise that I have been accused of a crime against humanity? And what is my crime? My sin. Have you guessed as to why I've been put through the ringer? Why I've gone 12 rounds in a boxing ring? Why I've stared out the lion in his den? why I have had spat after spat with people I never even met. For those who haven't cottoned on, I'll tell you. In confidence, of course. Deep breath. I'm more to the right of the political landscape than to the left. There, I've said it. It's in the open and can't be taken back. Yes, that is my crime. My Achilles heel. No matter that I have a standing monthly order with a number of charities, that I buy sandwiches, pop and chocolate bars for the homeless, I very rarely give them cash as charities advise against it. No matter that I've worked with and supported disaffected young people, or that I volunteer with a well-known charity, none of that matters. You see, I am vilified as a child snatcher, booed as a pantomime villain, made to feel as something beneath their shoes. They are those who rage against anyone who does not hold their views. When I attempted to point out that we live in a democracy and that my views are as valid as theirs, they laughed and made crude remarks. It's their way or the highway. When I back up a statement with a valid fact, I am deemed to be a snowflake or a mouthpiece for him. Now that really rattles me. These people have no idea of my feelings towards the person who runs the country, and that term him makes me sound like some sort of follower of the crowd, which I certainly am not. My views are shaped by the current climate of the day and are not static. We don't know and never will know as to whether an alternative government would have done any better than the present one. I like to think that had the left won the last election, I would have at least given them a chance. Not everything is black and white. It's the rudeness of some people which disturbs me. They use the foulest of languages and yet believe that this is okay. They say it's natural. It's everyday language. Not in my world. And the name calling, it's unbelievable. Do people actually get satisfaction from calling a fellow human being a baboon merely because they come from a different viewpoint? I would never stoop so low, and yet I'm supposed to be the baddie. I've even been called the C word. Although I don't actually know many of these people, some who are friends in real life are no better. I can do better than this blank government, they declare. I so desperately want to retaliate with words such as, "Are you kidding? You can't even decide what to have for your lunch. Run a country? You? Seriously?" But of course I don't. I hold my counsel. Thank goodness for yoga and meditation. Halfway through COVID, I made a conscious decision to no longer read political posts. I know my worth. I'm a good person, and to those who have belittled me, I say, just as I have an opposing view to you, you have an opposing view to me. The difference between us is that I will never call you a despicable name, swear at you, laugh in your face, or wish that you catch an infection that cannot be named. Who is the bigger person? You tell me.
That was Come Closer. It was performed by Andy Edwards and written by Irene Stuart for Make It Heard. Incidental music has been by Jack Myers. Thank you to the BBC Library for the sound effects. Editing the programme tonight has been Sharon Coltman. Thank you for listening. This is a Make It Right production.